So we are of late anarchy with Steigerwald, who is the first guest to be 2 times in the show, and it's very important in this case because we are going to talk a lot about war. That is one of the main things that she has been writing. So, Lucy, how you see this Syria conflict that is like very strange in many ways, have had a very complicated ways to understand it. There have been like paranoia and conspiracies surrounded it.
I mean, people that I don't know, when you say conspiracy, I think of the chemical weapons stuff. I think there's sort of a moderate conspiracy thing that it's okay to sort of question, especially with some of the previous attacks. People I trust, people I respect, some of them honestly have a bit of a conspiracy theory thing about Assad's use of chemical weapons. And I respect that. I don't feel confident about that kind of thing to have looked into it in depth. Someone, I don't remember if it was Dan Beer, who's usually my source for anti-conspiracy theory things, pointed out, people were saying, okay, the war was almost over. Why would Assad use chemical weapons, right? It's irrational. And the point was raised, why would Harry Truman use, atomic weapons when World War II was almost over? Like, that's irrational too. I mean, there's, I don't know. As a general point, I wish that there was a good sort of middle ground to find where you don't immediately assume the government's telling you the truth about conflicts without assuming, of course, that it wasn't real. The chemical weapons thing is a fraud. Just on the conspiracy theory point. On the general Syria war point, I have to confess that much like the initial intervention from Obama, actually, the one that was staved off a bit initially, I have this terrible feeling of fatalism about it. I haven't read anything lately. I don't. Antiwar.com is good about saying, call your damn elected officials, tell them you don't want this to happen and stuff like that. And I always feel like a bad contributor because the government's so good at making you feel like there's nothing you can do to stop these things. And every once in a while they are halted, but I don't know. I mean, I didn't expect anything else from Trump, but he's doing what they all do.
Yeah, I mean,
welcome to the status quo.
Yeah, it's very like weird in many ways because the conflict has taken many sides, and the involvement of Iran, of Russia, and even to a certain degree of Israel, and it has many takes that, well, even some non-state actors like the Kurds, and it's really a very curious kind of conflict, and it's really a very difficult to understand because, for example, like people said that there are leftists or Marxists or socialists that are pro-Assad, but on the other hand, there are socialists that are pro-Kurds, and it's kind of like there are many, even in the same camps, they don't necessarily are in the same place. But the thing that it strikes me as curious is that a lot of the right is reacting to this war or to this in a very different way that in other times, because in other times, with the exception of paleoconservatives, the ones that claimed the heritage of the old right, it was very few the ones who were questioning. But now Tucker Carlson, even like the people of the alt-right, as they sometimes call themselves, like it's very weird, but they seem to be like very skeptic of military intervention, and don't think that Trump will betray them if he starts a full-blown war with Syria.
Sorry. That makes the alt-right feel a bit like paleo-conservatives, right? Sort of definitely a similar echo of those guys. The Pat Buchanan-esque dislike of intervention, at least since Vietnam. So, it makes the alt-right feel more familiar in that way. It's odd that Tucker Carlson turned into that, because I always thought he was more of a National Review mixed conservative type, but I don't know, his new horrible talking head persona is interesting. I had a whole idea that I wanted to explore on the alt-right and intervention, and it was based a lot around, I think it was Mike Enoch, who is not just alt-right, but like full neo-Nazi, I think, not to give the alt-right too much credit, but, not all of them were overt Nazis. But he had a quote about how that just is really troubling and intriguing, where he says that the alt-right are the only legitimate anti-war movement left in the United States. And he said that, I believe it was right around when Trump first lobbed missiles at Syria, so about a year ago. And there was this bizarre setting where he had a anti-war protest. Richard Spencer was there, speaking of other overt Nazis, and Antifa people protested their anti-war thing. And obviously there were, very good reasons to protest Spencer and Enoch. There's no ambiguity there. But they were apparently protesting in what was technically an anti-war protest. So the layers of that are interesting and really distressing. And I have seen really obnoxious Trump fans express their disappointment in him for intervening. Ann Coulter, who, again, has become two-faced sort of since the Bush era. She used to be Ms. Invade their countries, kill their leaders, and convert them to Christianity, I believe was her response after 9/11. But she turned into, a Trump backer and suddenly an anti-interventionist. It's her new sexy persona. But she, and a lot of the other sort of Trump bots, they may be, disturbingly pro-Trump too often, but they will criticize him for intervention. I've seen it, and it's really interesting to me, and it makes me feel like, maybe you and I are sharing sort of a little piece of the ideological corner with some very strange and fairly horrible people. So I don't know.
Strange. I mean, I think weird things happening, and it's I don't know how to say it, but it's the alt-right has noticed something, that intervention leads to refugees, and they don't like refugees, so I guess that's the main reason. But it's interesting that like there are countries, for example, like Hungary, that doesn't receive refugees, so it's not. I mean, they don't care really, but it seems like it's a very weird issue also, because some neo-Nazis have like the feeling that the origin of the Western civilization is not necessarily in Greece, but in Iran or northern Syria, and some kind of mystic paganism and some sort of that kind of weird thing. So maybe that's also playing in the equation.
Yeah, I couldn't speak to that, but there's a lot of, I'm fascinated by a lot of these people, even though they're there's a lot of them are so awful in so many ways, but I always fall down terrible internet rabbit holes.
Yeah. So the other issue that I was going to ask you is about the neocons, because, for example, Tom Cotton is someone who is very, I mean, he's very awful, but on the other hand, he's interesting in the way that he's a very strange kind of politician. Like, he started as a more or less average neocon, and he has to go full Trumpian in many ways. I mean, he rejects refugees. Even if I'm not wrong, he once said that all Christian refugees should be accepted some time ago, and now he's basically to forbid any refugees, even Christians. Technically, the GOP maybe would have had some sympathy in the past, but it's very weird. I mean, it's kind of a very complex time to be a neocon, I guess, because they get a bad rap from the alt right, and even not necessarily the alt right, but the more grassroots conservatives don't like the term neocon, and I think probably if I mean probably Lindsey Graham could be a victim of the next wave of populist insurgents, and on the other one hand, I am kind of happy, but on the other hand, I feel it could be replaced by someone very awful. And it's how you see this evolution of the neocons.
Well, I mean, I'm suddenly remembering, I think it was around the 2004 election, but I could be wrong, where the word liberal, as applied to, mainstream Democrats in the US, became this sudden dirty word. And I never really understood why, neoliberal is you've written about this, obviously, another term that like there are these terms that like their associations change and whether they're loaded change, and for the last year or two, partially Trump and his people have helped make neocon sound like the ugly thing that it is, but unfortunately a lot of those people's objection to neocon comes with the supposed cosmopolitan element to it. The parts that you and I might like, but when put into practice by neocon types, turn into death and destruction, usually throughout the Middle East, but all over the world. Alt-right types don't like neocons because of intervention, but also because of this suspicion that, as you say, it causes refugees, which it fucking does, obviously. But this, the globalist mindset that they think neocons subscribe to, that bothers them. And as far as I know, I think that these clashing elements and these corners of what you call the right, they've always been there. I don't know if there's more of the paleo alt-righty types now with Trump. I think there probably is. Neocon, stuff, whatever that means. I can hear these semi-neocons crying that they're not a neocon. They just love intervention 85% of the time. It's out of fashion. It's not like, in my high school days when George Bush was making us all be ashamed to be from the United States. So I don't know. It's changing, but I don't see a lot of improvement. If the alt-right people are going to be anti-intervention, if outright Nazis are going to be anti-intervention, Nazis are not known for being anti-interventionist, for being isolationist. There's a reason we know the word blitzkrieg. There's they weren't happy to stay in Germany, even debated areas of Germany. They had much bigger plans than that, Lebensraum and all that. So pardon me if I don't really take Spencer and his ilk seriously when they claim anti-intervention, but I am admittedly interested and disturbed to be even theoretically sharing sort of an overlapping idea with them, even if my anti-interventionism is not fucking motivated by how much I hate immigrants, unlike some people.
Yeah, but continue to speaking about political tribes. How do you see like libertarianism under Trump? I mean, because this time has been
it's a disaster. It's such a disaster. Such a disaster. Oh man. I mean, specifically more, or in general. I mean, I think the answer to that question. Libertarians for Trump and all that. Like there was a whole big movement away from libertarianism towards Trumpism, and I don't understand it. I mean, I always say I could understand sort of the straws they were grasping at with some of the things he said. Like Trump loves to score points against anybody, right? So when somebody running for the Republican ticket, somebody who gets the nomination, somebody who wins, is scoring points against, Dick Cheney and saying the Iraq War was terrible. Like, okay, he didn't say it, on March 20th, 2003, but he said it, a decade before your liberal, deep thinkers actually apologized for being for the war. So, Trump is ridiculous, but he was, he says everything. So you can always find something he said that was right. 30 years ago, he was waxing on the idea of what if America legalized all drugs? And he was absolutely right about that. The idea that he'll go anywhere near that now is, of course, highly unlikely. If you've been around in the public eye long enough and you've run your mouth long enough, sometimes you sound right about stuff. And Trump has sounded right about foreign policy on occasion. That is not enough to justify the enthusiasm that people who are libertarians or anarchists, some of them, had for him. I despise Hillary Clinton. I think that she is the sort of platonic ideal of DC-ness. Trump was always a protectionist. He was always garbage on economics. He said that from day one. He was always just delighted with the police and basically said that, any kind of movement against them, any critique of them was just awful. And they're like, the biggest heroes in the United States. I mean, intervention stuff is the most important issue. But looking at somebody who is powerful and who got the nomination, who won, as even when most people, including Trump, didn't think it was possible, you can't trust them to the extent that the Libertarians for Trump people did. And a few of them are still making apologies for him. And he's a complete idiot about economics. And he's an idiot about law and order. And he's an idiot. I mean, even people who like him, kind of, a lot of them get that by now. But just, I get why you'd want somebody who was the anti-politician, but he wasn't really. And he obviously isn't now. He just, he made these delightful comments about how much Washington, D.C. sucked and politicians don't know anything and they can't help you. And the next step was, but I can help you. I know what you need. I know what America needs. I can fix it for you. It was not, it was not really a reaction to the ego of Washington, D.C. It was, let my ego take the place of the politician's ego because I can do it and they can't. I don't know why you trust that as a libertarian. I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it was a very stupid move. But I think libertarianism now is going in many curious directions. I, for example, have seen much more activity from left libertarians than before, and I think it's very interesting to see the kind of interaction that they are having with the broadly anarchism movement. For example, William Gillis is someone who I don't think he identifies as a libertarian, but he identifies himself as a free market anarchist, and he's someone who anarchists of different stripes see with interest. I guess not the national anarchists, but both strains of anarchism seem him with and Chelsea Manning is also a very curious case of an anarchist interested in libertarianism and somehow is running for Senate. I mean, it's a really kind of strange development.
Yeah, I actually met Gillis for the first time just a couple weeks ago. He was in town. He did a little speech at this tiny anarchist bookstore, and I hung out with him for a couple hours. My friend and I did, and he's awesome. He's scarily smart. He's a lot of fun to talk to. He'll talk about really heady stuff, and he'll also gossip with you about libertarian people, and it's great. And not to speak for him and his beliefs, but my impression of him is that he kind of drives every anarchist crazy because he is very left. He's on the lefter side of Center for Stateless Society, which he's, sort of in charge of now. So, people I know think he's a goddamn commie, right? But the lefty anarchists, social anarchists, whatever you want to call them, they look completely askance at him because he thinks markets are real. He thinks that there are certain tendencies. There are all these other elements that are sort of libertarian. So I think he kind of confuses everybody, which makes him, particularly interesting to speak to. I certainly don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I don't, including sort of no platforming and sort of anti-fascist stuff where I'm sort of, let's just say I'm uncertain about some things. I'm more adjacently biased anarchist if I'm picking a C4SS person. But Gillis, I never doubt that he's a comrade, to use the commie talk. Like he and I are on the same side as far as I can tell. I really do think that. And Manning is hanging out with people I know who are a little more free markety too. So I'm hoping that they rub off on her, some positive influence and maybe just some more ideas. I know people have tried to send her some kind of more free markety anarchist books. I don't want to critique her that much because I think she's generally great, but just, it would be even more awesome, I think, if she got influenced more towards thinking about, market dynamics, just, and knowing that they, the government can't fix that sort of problem. They'll just make
actually, funny stuff. Like last year, there was a Finnish professor of social science was here in Lima for a conference, and he was talking like he's a left-wing, like not a libertarian in any sense or an anarchist even, but he was making more or less the same points that the people of C4SS, like that the current corporate capitalism is not free market, and I think it's that kind of reflections is becoming kind of more mainstream now. I mean, I think, for example, Kathy Reisowitz is doing a great job. I think probably one of the few libertarians who have decided to focus on a subject and do it really, really great in the issue of zoning, and it's a very interesting issue because rent control and zoning and these kind of issues really generate a lot of problems for people. I mean, it's an issue that affects people's life, and a lot of people, because of the regulations of constructions, when their rent goes too high, they sometimes can't live in the city, and a lot of times it generates troubles because I mean, I know San Francisco is expensive and a lot of things, but San Francisco has the schools, San Francisco has the universities and things like that. So if you go to another area and then you want your kids or your relatives to go to school, it's very difficult. I think that's why I think San Francisco has made community college free for residents, I guess, because I guess they have tried to pay some back, like bad conscience about like having not been doing much to remedy the housing crisis.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen Kathy's writing lately, I confess, but I saw that she was doing kind of urban and zoning writing, and she, being in San Francisco, you desperately need that free market perspective over there. I think San Francisco might be the most expensive city to live in the United States. If it's not, it's got to be top 3, my cousin, I don't know if he was technically in Oakland, but I remember he paid $500 a month to literally rent a crawl space in a house, like a crawl space where the renting stuff, it's appalling. The housing prices there, and the lefty solutions to it are almost entirely going to make things worse. So I think we do need like the free market people over there.
It's very weird because I was commenting some of the staff and I mentioned something about Stockholm because I knew that Stockholm has like this kind of same problems, and actually a Swedish guy commented it and said that there is also a GMB movement like that one more housing and things like that. Yeah, it's really happening in many places for different reasons. I mean, with all the problems in Latin America, I think the housing regulations are not as strict. I mean, generally, there are some very few places in large capitals of Latin America where there are some kind of housing regulations, but beyond that, generally there are not that much. And other issues that I think libertarians have been tackling, I think with some kind of success, is the issue of how I will say this, occupational licensing, which is a very huge issue. I think that it's kind of gaining momentum, I guess. I think that.
Yeah, actually, occupational licensing, to me, it's a bit like civil asset forfeiture, but anti-civil asset forfeiture stuff has gotten even more mainstream acceptance. And these are issues that I associate Reason Magazine, Institute for Justice, Radley Balco, people who were on this 15 years ago, and the mainstream discovered these issues 2 or 3 years ago, 5 tops. And I know that IJ and Radley and people like that are never going to get the mainstream credit that they deserve for being on these issues really early. If we're talking about sort of an anti-libertarian bias in the world, is that no one is ever going to notice that, Radley was talking about asset forfeiture 15 years ago. And people finally figure out what it was because of, John Oliver 3 years ago. He did a funny skit on it that was very good. It was a very good introduction to the general principle of asset forfeiture. But libertarians being on this early, they're never going to get credit for it, ever. Occupational licensing, that's another thing I associate with IJ a lot. And I think that's not as far outside libertarian circles, but people are finally getting that one. And libertarians will never get the credit for being on it, for being right about it.
Other issue where I mean, not necessarily a libertarian issue per se, but Brian Kaplan has been talking about vocational education, and he has been in a lot of media. Actually, even in Spanish, they have published some issues about his book, The Case Against Education, which is, I mean, it's not necessarily a libertarian take per se, but the issue that a book written by a libertarian is being commented even in the media in another language is kind of remarkable. I mean, it's not something that happens every day. It's really quite something. And I guess it has something to do like with the issue of college, because it is becoming expensive in well, in the United States, but here also in Peru and in other places, and it's really a very complex issue, because I know here some student groups in private universities have tried to make protests, but they have never been able to get to a point. I mean, it's here it's much more difficult to take a private university, like in Harvard. I think they have not for tuition motives, but for other reasons. Like you could take a faculty or something, but here there are much more security, I guess, because of the shining pad and another kind of issues that the campus had to be relatively more secure. So they are not like in the United States that you go walk into like a lecture hall or something. Like they are like closed in some way. So yeah, I mean it's very difficult, but I guess this is a very interesting take, the one of Brian, about like how vocational education is being thrown out of the bus, and I don't know if it's libertarian per se, but I guess it's also
it's just a more radical than some libertarian take, like a lot of them, and something I expect Kaplan to be arguing with vigor, because that's kind of what he does.
Yeah, it's so there have been a lot of things going on in the libertarian movement that happened in the Trump era, but maybe not necessarily are related to the Trump era, I will say. It's very complex to say that like in some ways I guess that many publications are going to I will say that there are some dangers about the current situation of the libertarian movement, because up to 1 or 2 years ago, there used to be relatively a lot of interest in Spain to translate libertarian books, and it has kind of fallen down. And here in Latin America, it's very difficult to buy books in physical from the U.S. because the postal agencies are really bad, and the public libraries and the university libraries generally don't have many materials from libertarians. So on the other hand, I guess that there are many much, I mean, like these libertarian podcasts or libertarians in general on social media or libertarians writing in other kind of outlets, and it's really creating a new atmosphere for what is going to be the libertarian movement in the future.
Well, that's usually, I don't know, that's usually the situation in life and libertarianism. I always confess, you, by virtue of not being in America and not getting to be as self-centered as people in the States are, you always have a more international mindset when it comes to things, including the liberty movement. So I feel chastised just thinking about how I'm not as aware of international sort of status of these ideas. Though I always want to find out more. I would love to go to that Guatemala University, for example.
I am not in the mood to run into my take, some kind of my, but I have, and but Guatemala is kind of dangerous. Also, I should warn you. And
I was there for 2 days in college, which was 9 years ago. I think it's probably a little worse than it was back then. But I saw a random guy with a very large gun wandering by to call, so I don't know that it was great. But
yeah, Central America is quite dangerous. In general, with the exception of Costa Rica, which is much more calm, and Panama City. Yeah, but Central America is quite. Mexico, well, in Mexico, it depends on the area because it's there are many Mexicans in some ways, I guess. Yeah, I mean it's very funny because, for example, like I was talking with a friend, a libertarian friend here in Peru, and he was saying like it's very funny that we don't know much about the Brazilian libertarian movement, and we are very close, but to be honest, we sometimes read what the Americans write about them because, I mean, technically, a person that knows Spanish could read a little bit about Portuguese, but generally we don't do it because it's still a different language and it sounds kind of funny. And yeah, it's really, I guess it's not in Latin America. It's not as in Europe. That I guess in Europe it has become much more organized in many ways, and I guess Bill Weir's could have tell you more about that.
yes. I'm sad I missed him at Students for Liberty. I didn't get to meet him, so I can't believe that Bill is real. He might be real.
Yeah,
I'm not sure Luxembourg's real either, actually.
To ask you about. Yeah, how do you see the issue with Twitter cultures of subcultures? Because now a lot of, I mean, for example, the friends that I have that are not libertarians, even they, the ones that use social media the most, even they were aware of libertarians because they said libertarians are all the time on social media, especially on Twitter. And now it seems like it's the tankies, like the communists, the people with red flags, and some anarchists also, some more of conventional left anarchists with the black flag are using Twitter a lot, and it's very weird.
Yeah, and again, the word libertarian, like I've had some people follow me on Twitter, sometimes very briefly, probably because they found me from some conventional sort of right winger that followed me, thought I was something I wasn't, and unfollowed me a week later. There are people who proudly have the word libertarian, like in their Twitter bio or something, and they're not. they're not our people. You know, they're Republicans who maybe are a little better on a few issues, or they're right wingers of different kinds. You know, lefties get mad that U.S. libertarians kind of took the word. So it's, you know, it's a word. It can be used for lots of different things. The eternal debate on what to call yourself is both tedious and pointless, but also important. William Gillis was delighted when I said I'd stopped using anarcho-capitalist, and I credited our beloved comrade Christopher Cantwell, the crying Nazi, for finally pushing me over the edge and making me drop the ANCAP label entirely. I guess I listed market anarchist on Facebook for a long time because, you know, if it's good enough for Sheldon Richman and Anthony Gregory, it's good enough for me. That's my motto. But I mean, ANCAP is too infiltrated.
Yeah.
With Cantwell people who are absolutely, you know, they are not our people, and they're so bad that like lefty entities of dubious nature, like the Southern Poverty Law Center, actually acknowledge that Cantwell is not a libertarian normal person. Like, they will talk about the Free State Project and like Cantwell's former friends and colleagues and stuff, and basically acknowledge that Cantwell has gone way worse than that. He's so bad that, you know, people like that admit that he is not he's not our ilk.
What's going on with the Free State Project? Do you know about that? I haven't like catch on any of these kind of projects.
What about? I'm sorry.
The Free State Project in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I always thought that was a great idea that, again, has been sullied by people like Cantwell, or at least they've tried to sully it. There are still some good people around there. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good idea that, and I think people should keep doing that kind of thing, but it strikes very nervous lefties as suspicious. I think it's a better idea to do it in the States than to do it in another country. Like, don't come off like William Walker, or someone, you know, like leading your little army to invade somewhere in Latin America just because you can. You know, get like, well, don't get Peter Thiel to do anything because fuck that guy. I don't know. Get Jeff Bezos to build you a seasteading platform and like try out your life there, but like, I don't know. Try not to invade other countries.
Yeah, I was going to. There's I have forgot her name, but she's a Ron Paul supporter who has run for a state senator. I think Elizabeth Edwards. I think he is running on a sex work decriminalization. Has been like very active. So I mean, it's a small state. It's a state where allegedly, because I don't know people from there, but allegedly the regular folks there are quite liberty minded, even if they don't have read or listened to much of the libertarian literature. So maybe there's quite some hope there.
I don't know. I'd like to go up there sometime. I've actually never been to New Hampshire. I'd like to go to their fest even now. Especially now that they've actually kicked out, you know, the worst people, or they've wandered off down their own Nazi paths. But I've never been up there, so I don't know a huge amount of sort of the details. But like all libertarians, the gossip gets to me a little bit too. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that the Nazi relationship with New Hampshire is that, as far as I know, New Hampshire is pretty wide because it doesn't have like much diversity. So I guess maybe that has more to do with the fact that they were barely talking about libertarianism.
I mean, if you know, like the fringy people, they congregate after fringy politics like libertarianism, and physically they congregate in the U.S. in usually a lot of the time in rural areas. So, you know, like in Idaho, I know the Aryan Nations used to be up there. For some like weird like encyclopedia reason, I think my dad and I were recently like trying to look up the demographics of Montana, which I love, but trying to figure out how many black people are in there, because I believe it's the lowest population of any state in the U.S. and it's like 5,000 people in this humongous state. So there there are corners of the West and the Pacific Northwest, and probably the East as well, where these people that we don't necessarily want around us do go and hide. And if they want to pull a Weaver family and hide away, like that's better than them politically organizing. And hopefully the government won't bother them.
Yeah, I also was trying to not going to miss the opportunity to ask you about the Waco series. Did you watch it?
I watched a lot of it, and I recorded the last episode on my parents' DVR, and I've not been back to watch it yet. I saw the first 4 episodes. I reviewed those for the Federalist, and I thought it was amazing, actually. I thought it was really good, because I have seen this is a docudrama, it's fictionalized. I have seen documentaries that were less accurate than this series. When there's a CNN one from about 5 years ago that was absolutely horrific, and I've seen other ones of that ilk that are very just like crying about the feds and just not humanizing the Davidians at all. Excuse me. And a lot of reviewers hated the Waco series because it gave the Davidians their due in a lot of ways, finally. And it's not perfect, but, the character of Dave Koresh plays a really big part in things, and he is portrayed very well, I think. Not, I've never met a cult leader, but being charismatic, but a little bit scary and sort of friendly, but they could, bite you if you set them off. I bought it. It rang true to me. There has to be a reason why people stay with people like Koresh. And the best you can do if you weren't there is to try to explain it without simply going, the brave feds tried to rescue the brainwashed cultists, and they tragically failed, and it haunts them to this day, which is literally the CNN documentary. That was it. All it is feds crying about the kids that they didn't rescue. And I believe that upsets them, but that doesn't make it a good documentary. It was shameful, honestly.
If I'm not wrong, here in Latin America, it hasn't broadcast, and I think it doesn't going to broadcast. So, there are some shows that for some reason don't get the rights here.
Yeah.
Roseanne was one of the other ones. But the funny issue is I follow a Finnish guy on Twitter who was doing his PhD on American history, but in Finland, and funny 2 or 3 days after he make an article in the Washington Post about the Roseanne, like the new reboot with the politics, the Roseanne as a Trump supporter and so on. And the funny thing is that he's doing his thesis is about all in the family, the political relations in the previous show of Roseanne. So it's really weird, but I guess it's very funny. Like I guess there are a lot of ways to tackle some issues of like in the 90s, like the X-Files was political without being political per se. I think it was like it had some issues with like tackling and being relatively critical of the FBI, and I don't know if you have seen the new seasons. The new season?
I have not seen the final season. I got the sense that save the Darren Morgan episode, predictably, which apparently is very good, the rest of it was a big mess, which I believe. I'm very sorry that they didn't get Vince Gilligan back during these last 2 series to write an episode, because Morgan is rightfully praised as being amazing. But Vince Gilligan, who obviously later went to do Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, the latter of which I've not seen, though I hear it's also libertarian, actually more libertarian. It's in subtext. Gilligan wrote some really great X-Files episodes. One of my favorite ones is actually the villain is very Kilgrave in Jessica Jones. He can make people do what he wants just by talking to them. That's a good episode. Yeah, I wish they
Yeah,
got him back. Sorry, I just
I
really
mean,
want to watch the X-Files now. I was thinking that.
I am going to spoil the X-Files, but I will have find interest in the original project because at least at a moment there was a possibility that David Duchovny was going to direct another one. He's really kind of strange. I remember, I think it's Hollywood AD, which was very self-referential. I think Gary Handling plays himself, plays him, and I think her wife plays.
That's season 7, man. Where it all went wrong in season 7. That was the
Yeah,
steepest decline in the show, I
yeah,
think. Because 6 is actually quite good, but 7 goes really sideways.
yeah. It
You
was
know,
a very
theoretically, the X-Files is too minarchist because it
yeah,
semi-convinces you that if you just become part of the FBI, part
yeah.
of the government, you can help bring down the bad part of the government. But I mean, they semi-talk about that sort of thing, but it does become a little ridiculous how many times, Mulder and Scully obviously are on to terrible government secrets, and yet they still keep their jobs somehow. It's they have to do
Yeah.
some fancy tricks to sort of explain that in the narrative, how the hell they still have jobs. But
Yeah, some like a month or two ago, like Jason Walker put a link at an interview with Robert Anton Wilson when he was alive. He was asked about the X Files, and he actually didn't like it. I was surprised because a lot of people thought that he was the inspiration of the X Files because of all the weird stuff has been writing, and he actually didn't like it.
I don't know how much of it he saw or what in particular he disliked. I don't know my Robert Anton Wilson that well, but I don't know. I mean, there are reasons you could dislike the X Files. If you are paranoid, either legitimately or a little more Alex Jonesy, you might find it sort of mocking, sort of a parody of people who don't trust the government and have crazy ideas. But it's a lovely show because characters like the lone gunman and a one-off sort of similar alien hunter character who I think predates them. Sort of nerdy type of characters, like using the internet in the early 90s type of characters that I usually read those characters as kind of loving towards the paranoid. I think Mulder in Darren Morgan episodes is actually kind of mocked, but in general, Mulder's a really interesting character. He's the manly man with the gun, but he is very damaged and very sort of emotionally driven, which
Yeah,
I like that. It makes things more
yeah,
interesting with the dynamic.
yeah. I mean, it's very interesting to try to look at the X Files and the evolution that it has had, and it's like I didn't watch it in the original running. I watched it after it. Like watched 1 or 2 episodes, but then I watched the whole seasons, and it was kind of interesting. And I mean, it spoke about an era, and I guess the Long Gunmen were kind of a very curious project because I think fans love it, but when they did the spin-off series, they tanked it very badly, and it was kind of sad that part.
I watched at least a couple episodes of that series when it was on. I watched the X-Files when it was on sometimes, but I was so scared of like aliens and ghosts that I always thought the show built up to revealing aliens a lot more slowly than it did. It's actually just that I was too scared to watch the ones that were more overt with UFOs and stuff. So the Lone Gunman show is famous, sort of, however, for which you might know, an
Yeah,
episode that aired like 4 months before 9/11
yeah,
talks about a freakishly similar government plot,
yeah,
and that drives people crazy. But again, it's one of those Occam's razor situations where like what's more likely that they used that the idea of that Cuba plot, Operation Northwoods, I believe, the idea of using planes as missiles, that it was, you know, creepily similar timing, a couple of coincidences. That or what? Fox writers knew 9/11 was coming and tried to warn us by writing it into a TV show. I mean, sometimes I don't know what conspiracy theorists really are saying, because that is much more ridiculous than it was a freaky coincidence. You know, like the writers of The Lone Gunman were trying to warn us about 9/11, but we just didn't listen. That I don't think that happened.
Yeah, it's
probably not.
like, it's really weird. I guess
This is weird though.
Conspiracy theories are not as fine now that they really become fake news, and it's becoming like very strange talking about a conspiracy theory. Like,
rational, you should be a rational conspiracy theorist, which sounds like an oxymoron, but I mean, keep an open mind towards like people doing horrible stuff in secret. Be aware of the stuff we know that they've done in secret, but don't attribute these impossible things to the government. You know, not just because there's no damn evidence, but because, you know, what you know, the most absurd 9/11 conspiracies involve, you know, hologram towers and, you know, hologram planes and just like all these, you know, these very elaborate things that would involve thousands of people being in on the plot and things like that. And just, you know, are there details about 9/11 that weren't said, or about the Bin Laden killing that weren't said? Probably. There probably always still, and you know, honestly, with JFK, killing one man, especially in an open car like that, I mean, Oswald pulled the trigger, but, you know, could there have been a larger conspiracy there? Probably. I mean, just like, I think you should be an agnostic. I think being an agnostic on conspiracy theories is the rational, reasonable thing to do in the world.
Yeah, I believe it too. But I was wondering, the other day I was like entering to my to YouTube, and it appeared the other time the conspiracy about like Avril Lavigne being dead, and that she was replaced by, I don't know, an actress, you know, like, and these kind of conspiracies are the weirder, because, you know, like one thinks this conspiracy is dead, and then someone uploads a video and starts talking about this again, and it's very weird.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, I sort of assume that most ridiculous sounding conspiracy theories, most of them have true believers. I mean, we know that there are sincere flat earthers and people who think nobody ever landed on the moon, and just, I don't know. It's very strange. There's always people who believe something, and I am not that great at science. You know, I can't prove a lot of things that I suspect by showing you an equation or, you know, mixing beakers, but I know what I don't know. And the government doesn't know what they don't know either. And that's one reason why they're so horrible, is that they do the things that they do because they have this diluted sense of knowledge, you know, to get all Hayekian. But the idea that the conspiracy theorists know enough to, the conspiracy makers know enough to do these, you know, elaborate things, and that you, the truth teller, the Fox Mulder, have figured out the whole thing based on 3 GeoCities websites and 2 YouTube videos. Just know what you don't know, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I mean, one of the issues that this era probably will bring, I don't know if it will bring necessarily, but the issue about media and politics being merged into one thing because of Trump, it is going to create some very strange kind of, and I think it's creating already some kind of strange twists. And for example, one of them is the New York governor's race, where Cynthia Nixon, the star of Sex and the City, is challenging Trump, is challenging Cuomo, the governor there, and she's running to her left, and she's like very, like, it's really like she's strolling like a god. I mean, it's trolling after trolling after trolling. I think I'm
I
not
mean,
sure.
she seems sincere, though. I mean,
Yeah,
I think. I mean, well, think about how weird it must have been, not even when Reagan was elected president, but when he ran for and then became governor of California. I mean, the
yeah,
guy was like a B movie handsome actor, and there he was, the governor of California. I mean, that must, these things have happened for a while. Trump, we never had a completely lacking in political experience president, and that never stops being weird when I think about it, honestly. But we also never had, like, we had Ron Paul flirting with the Alex Jonesian side of things, but Trump has been on the Alex Jones show repeatedly,
yeah,
and he's the
yeah,
president, and that is
yeah.
new. He is his like shaky grasp of what is true and his completely shameless embrace of just blathering without the policy polish of previous politicians. That was very alliterative. I mean, that is new, and that is going to be bewildering when we look back at it, whatever happens next. That not everything is new, but I mean, there is a newness to Trump that I understand to an extent why people lost their minds, but they didn't lose their minds very productively. But I suppose most times you don't do that. So
Yeah, do you think a libertarian celebrity will come out of the closet of somewhere? I guess like, I don't know. Do you
um
think?
well, we have a few, I suppose, and we jealously jealously treasure them. Like Kurt Russell, our friend from Escape from New York and Big Trouble in Little China, is a libertarian. Clint Eastwood is sort of, but not exactly one. I don't know. I mean, like overtly libertarian, we don't have that many. We have Dave Barry, who entertained me as a child with his newspaper columns. I don't know. We have the same usual suspects we always had, I guess. Jesse Ventura was a libertarian and was elected governor of Minnesota and was like a celebrity politician, kind of what we were just speaking about. But as far as I can tell, he went off the deep end too in terms of getting more tinfoil hat-y. So, I mean, not only do we want libertarians and not have enough of them, we want libertarians who don't slip into total conspiracy theorist territory and stay not moderate, because fuck that moderate stuff, but in the rational, at least in the
Yeah,
sensible.
I was going to ask you about the libertarian candidate with that wanted to give machine guns to the homeless.
Oh, yeah, that sounds okay. I mean, I don't know who's paying for them, but I mean, I know a lot of people who say, arm the mentally ill, arm the homeless, and like I get that. Those are people who get hurt by the state and by other people much more than vice versa. I don't know that I would, condone an active like passing out machine guns to the homeless program necessarily, but I mean that's the kind of libertarian absurdity that I can't ever fully be against, because that sort of, it's not very useful because it freaks out everybody at once, but I have a certain fondness in my heart for that sort of attitude because it's not nearly as wrong as most things.
Yeah, I mean, this political time is very strange, because not only there are new politicians out there, but there are politicians making a comeback, and one of them is Dennis Kucinich, which I kind of like him because he's anti-war, but I don't know how much will do in Cleveland. I guess he is kind of civil libertarian on the beliefs and pressure and things like that.
I mean, I haven't checked on Kucinich recently, but while he was in office, I liked him okay. I could be wrong. I'd have to sort of check on this, but I think he has better anti-war credentials than like Sanders, who is obviously Sanders is obviously better than average, but is overrated his radicalism is overstated by both sides, honestly. Kucinich, I think, as far as I know, has been very consistently anti-war. And yeah, just on that alone, I wished he was back in office, which is always a disturbing thing to say.
Yeah, it's very funny because, I mean, he's really quite different, and like there are two libertarian-ish candidates running for Senate. I mean, Austin Peterson in Missouri, and Ron Paul supporter in Maine, Eric Brackey, if I'm not saying that wrong. So, I mean, it's not impossible to think that they could win because Missouri, it's relatively purple, but Austin could get some votes of people who are not happy with McCaskill. And in Maine, Ron Paul had a lot of support, so he could grapple to the base of support that Ron Paul had, and try to reach out to some Democrats who by the way, August King is an independent, so technically they will not be betraying the Democratic Party. So I think it's not impossible to think that they could win. But on the other hand, what they could do in a Senate that is like very loyal to Trump, it's very, and I don't think they're going to switch much with the Democrats.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, I haven't even checked on which version of Austin is running this time because there are many. And I would be very surprised if, any of his opponents for primaries on the Democratic side, that there's no way they're worse than he is. But he has, he's not my dream candidate regardless. And I have some issues with that man. And even people that are more good than bad, like Justin Amash, even Rand Paul. Speaking of versions of people like that, I mean, they let you down every other time.
And Thomas
at best. That's
Thomas,
yeah.
He seems a little bit better on most issues.
I mean, Massey. Amash has been a little shakier in the last few years. I'm trying to remember. Is it Doug Jones? Is that his name? Who's anti-war? There is that
from Miracle Online, I think.
I'm sorry.
Walter Jones.
Walter. I don't know why I decided his name was Doug. That's weird. I don't know. Yes, exactly. If you think about it and you feel optimistic, there are actually more of them than I remember at any given time, though. Everybody except Rand is, of course, a congressman. So, I mean, there's, again, like the Austin thing, there's no way that, the person who would be in office if Amash or Massey or even Rand Paul wasn't, whoever, what is not seen is got to be worse in this case. But I don't think libertarians should put much hope in the electoral process at all. Though people who choose to do that, I'm not, like, if they think they can do something, I'm not necessarily opposed. It's like, that's going to break your heart, especially if you're a sincerely good person. One reason I love Eric Garris so much is that he's like, antiwar.com. He's like, he's had a long career being involved in politics, and he finds it all interesting, and he enjoyed a lot of it. But he wasn't very successful because he's not a terrible person. That's not, I mean, that's like, he's a good libertarian and he's a good person. And that's why he's not, rich and wildly successful in politics or lobbying or something. Because, I mean, I do think that's how it works. You sell, I think you have to sell your soul a little bit. You might be better choice than somebody else. That is, there's always harm reduction, I guess, is what we call it as libertarians. But
I mean, for example, you could see like Tyler Cowen. If I'm not wrong, he used to be a free market anarchist also in the past. Like, that's what I have heard. I'm not could not confirm that because I'm not that old to have been around when he was young, but that's what I have heard sometimes. And he has been very soft. I mean, he praised the president of Peru now is ousted by corruption. He called it almost libertarian. It was very weird.
There's
Yeah, but I
yeah, there's a whole thing with Latin America and libertarians misunderstanding in yeah.
or Americans misunderstanding Latin America, I guess.
Well, yeah, we love to do that when we pay attention at all. But I mean, I'm sure you know better than I do, but just the whole, yeah, there's a whole thing there.
Yeah, but it's very complex because Kuczynski was also a U.S. citizen. He was of Swiss and well, his father was born in Prussia, but I think he doesn't have a nationality. So yeah, I don't know what, but anyway, that his family is European and he lived in England. He studied in Oxford, then he studied in Princeton, and he lived for a while in the U.S. So I guess maybe Tyler met him when he was in New York because he lived in New York for a while, and maybe then he was a little bit more free market, but then he became much more started working in government, and he started to create a lot of government programs that are not even like social welfare, but were basically corruption to give their friends favors and yeah, things like that.
Sounds like politics. Yeah, and you can't, I mean, I don't know, libertarians get so excited by the idea that someone's, loosening up the economy. Sometimes they miss the larger picture that someone is still a strong man, or they don't even know the context, or it's just and sometimes it's understandable. Sometimes they go way too far, and it just turns into just fascist stuff and 1,000 Pinochet helicopter jokes, which are not even jokes because they're literally just saying the same thing over and over again. And I believe that humor, like a joke, has to involve some kind of surprise, for the hearer of the joke. So just being like, haha, helicopter rides is not actually a joke. It's just saying a slogan that makes you sound like a sociopath. So I don't really get that. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you were talking about the issue about the free speech issue. It's quite complex. I was talking to a Canadian girl once, and I was talking to her, and I was saying that here in Peru it's more or less the opposite. Like it's conservatives that want to shut down the left wing events, and for example, in Peru, they're actually like really terrorist sympathizers because there are people who still sympathize with Shining Path, particular Shining Path, because the Tupac Amaru revolutionary movement is more or less dead. I guess. I mean, Guevarism in general is more or less dead. Like there are people that have a Che Guevara t-shirt, but more or less like as an ideology is kind of dead. So it's very complex kind of the process that went, because I once met some people who debate them on a forum, and actually the authorities on campus like take off the light of all the campus to forbid the debate because they and it has happened like sometimes, like, but as Robert Mariani was not by any far a leftist or something. He was mocking the people of Talking Points Memo because of not Talking Points Memo, like Turning Points USA, because one of them like dressed as a baby and in diapers, as he said, is these people going to fight Maoism on campus? Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, Turning Points is a mess as far as I have ever heard.
Yeah.
I always associate the use of the word liberal in Latin America as I don't know if, like, to generalize horribly, if people in Latin America still use liberal to mean sort of a semi-libertarian thing, because obviously here it has this association with sort of the Democratic Party of all things, the very
Yeah, now it depends on the country, I guess, but in general, it's someone who leans more right than left. I don't use the term liberal to describe myself, for example. Like, also, I guess I'm not, like a burn it all, like kind of libertarian or left libertarian in some way. It's very funny. I sometimes have tried to call myself different things, like libertarian right, because I'm a huge fan of Nader, and I think Nader is right on some things, but sometimes I think he missed the points of, because he has read Rothbard, which is much more than any DC center left people has do it. So yeah,
That is
I give
true. That is
credit
true.
for that. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Like there used to be a guy in Wisconsin who used to call himself a fiscally conservative socialist, and I know the term sounds funny, but I think it's really an interesting guy. The guy was like he talked on the at the Cato Institute conference, and he reduced taxes, but also was against incarceration of minorities, and was pro charter schools, and
So where did
also
the socialists come in? I mean,
just he was kind of anti-war, pro
yeah, I'm
immigration.
still waiting for the socialist part. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
I don't
overlap,
know.
but
I
like
guess
nothing
Yeah, I
bad.
guess that he was a Democrat, I guess, and that he came from the left. But well, I mean, Gis Walker once wrote about his downfall. He was caught in an affair, and that he had to renounce it. But it would have been an interesting kind of politician, because he sounded quite libertarian in some ways, even if he called himself a socialist. And he sounded like the kind of socialist that probably would sound much more interesting than Bernie.
Well,
And
he
it's
doesn't sound like a socialist to me, but he sounds like, um, like a 19th century individualist anarchist. And a lot of those people use the word socialist in a way that I think is absurd to do today, because that word it's done. Whatever it might have meant in the 19th century, when used by the best, most individualist people like Spooner or even Tucker, the word socialist is ruined. So I would find it very strange that someone who sounds like an absolute dream politician, but like never dare to dream of someone that good, would use the word socialist because it's so alienating. I mean, I think that one's ruined. I think we have to let that one go. And I've told left anarchists and libertarians this as well, that I don't. We can talk about whether capitalism is a good word to use for what we desire, but socialism, just toss it out. It's done. Get it out of here.
Yeah, I don't use the word socialist that much, to be honest. It's but I guess it's difficult. I mean, in different countries it has like different kind of meanings, and it's very complex. For example, the issue with Brazilians, there are Brazilian anarchists that has a complex relationship with Lula, and also in Venezuela, it's really getting like very weird, how this stuff is going on. I think the country that I'm really interested in is Cuba, because there have been like anarchists from the start of the Cuban Revolution, and despite that, the anarchists have been like beaten up by the police, attacked, like arrested, and but they have like, I don't know. I have heard that there are anarcho-capitalists there, so it's very wild.
That would be a weird place to be. That
Yeah,
I'm not sure how that would work, honestly, but
yeah. It's yeah. Tom Woods is a very weird guy, but once I hear he interviewed a Chinese guy who was a Rosbardi and actually lived in China, so it
wow.
was very weird. Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know to how much degree like the Chinese Communist Party will let people promote Rothbard like so freely as now. I guess
Well, has anyone
the
checked on that guy lately to see if he's free and alive? Because that might help answer the question.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have talked about a lot of different subjects. I think we could leave it here. So thanks, Lucy, for being here, and people will follow you at Lucy Stack, always saying interesting stuff
Well, thank
online.
you. Thank you for giving me the chance to rant. It's been too long since I've done so. Reminds me why I do what I do. And it's always good to talk to you in your beautiful cloud room. Forgot that you have that lovely wall.
Yeah, it's very funny. Well, bye.
Bye.